Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 175, I calibrate Leo Laporte's OLED TV with Robert Heron. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded September 19th, 2013. Episode 175, Calibrating Leo's OLED. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by ProXPN. ProXPN is a virtual private network that allows you to use the internet the way it should be, anonymous and unfiltered. For 20% off your new account, go to proxpn.com/twit and use the code HTG.
Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek and Director of Content at avsforum.com. On today's special episode of Home Theater Geeks, I'm here with Robert Heron.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here too, because we are doing something really special. We are calibrating Leo's OLED TV.
Nice.
The
55-inch curved OLED from Samsung.
From Samsung. It's the KN55S9 to be precise.
Beautiful. And I have to say, just looking at it with the default settings, it looks pretty good, but I think we can make it a little bit better.
I think we can too. Now, we're going to take you through the entire calibration process here, and it's going to be pretty geeky.
We're going to dig into some settings.
We're going to dig into some settings, and we're going to be using some really interesting equipment as well. Now, those of you who want to set the basic picture settings, which are contrast, brightness, color, tint, sharpness, can do so with an inexpensive setup disc like Spears & Munsell HD Benchmark or Joe Kane's Digital Video Essentials.
Totally, or even the AV.
Or AVS HD 709, which is a free downloadable program that lets you do the same thing, which we're going to do first. I don't know about you, Robert, but I always tend to start with that.
Totally, because that helps you get some of the basic controls out of the way and make sure that they're already set up properly before you dig into some of the more advanced settings.
Exactly.
That can really alter picture quality. If you have to go back and mess with some of the basic settings after you do the advanced calibration, that's doing it backward. So
exactly.
You don't want to do that.
Now, instead of using a disc for this process that we're going to do, I brought along what's called a signal generator or a pattern generator. It's this little box here called the AV Foundry Video Forge. And it's going to produce all of the test patterns that we need to do all these settings. Then what I'm going to be doing is using Konica Minolta CS200, which is what's called a colorimeter, and it measures the colors coming off the screen and tells us how accurate they are, whether they are what they're supposed to be. Now, Robert, you brought along a different meter that we're going to also check out.
Totally. From X-Rite, their i1 Pro model. It is a great portable device that actually does on-screen contact to take measurements. Whereas with the CS200, it's more of like a camcorder where you can shoot from a distance, which makes it great for doing things like projection setup or even doing HD TVs too, because it's such an accurate device and it's very consistent in terms of its readings, and it's fast.
That's one of its big advantages, is that it's fast. But I'm interested in comparing what the i1 Pro measures as compared to the CS200, because we're in uncharted territory here.
This is true.
The OLED TV, we don't exactly know what the spectral power distribution is of red, green, and blue.
And I've seen that with the person who provided my hardware, they do provide updates specific for different display types, firmware upgrades for the devices themselves, the measurement tool. So I'll be curious to see if this handles it properly compared to, say, just a traditional LCD or a plasma display.
Exactly. So we should explain briefly what OLED is. This is a new technology, a new flat panel technology that has been promised to us for years. We've seen it at CES, and we've seen Samsung and LG and Panasonic and Sony all saying, oh, it's coming, it's right around the bend. And that was years and years of that.
Totally. I think one of the things really, if you could think of what would be the most ideal display technology, OLED really comes close because it's super thin, paper thin, literally.
Literally.
In addition, it's also very bright. They can make them very, very bright. But when it goes dark, when it creates a black portion on the screen, or when it creates dark detail, it can be as inky dark as any other technology out there. And
in particular, it rivals CRT, those old, big, massive boxes that we all used to have. No flat panel technology has achieved that level of blackness until now with OLED.
Totally. And it gets rid of some of the image problems that you've had with things like LCD technology, where you had off-axis angle issues, where if you move to the side of the screen and suddenly the image would brighten, or you'd lose contrast, or colors would start to shift.
Exactly.
With this, not so much.
Not so much. Now, that's a good thing, because in particular, for some reason, Samsung and LG, the two companies that have now made OLED or OLED screens that are available to purchase, have made them curved, which
I want to say they're trying to temper the reaction, or temper the desire for these screens, because they're not able to produce a lot of them yet. They've all announced and shown demos of flat panel televisions, OLED screens in particular, and larger screens at that. So I expect at CES we'll see some flat OLEDs definitely being announced in terms of coming to market, but this one's curved, and
so is the LG.
It is. And it's interesting.
It is interesting. I asked Samsung, why did you make a curved OLED screen? And they said, well, we want to differentiate it from the other flat panels, the LCDs and the plasmas. Yeah, okay. But is it really worth? I mean, this TV is $9,000.
It's worth every penny.
Worth every penny.
Yeah, just give me three.
Surround me. The LG is $15,000.
It was. I think they've now cut their price and price match what Samsung's doing, or one of the other.
Right.
Met the middle ground.
They're coming up. They're coming into a similar parity there.
One screen size, 55 inches for either manufacturer.
Yep.
Very expensive technology at this point.
Yep.
So it's the early adopter phase of this product.
Exactly. So let us start by adjusting the basic picture controls.
Yeah.
By the way, we have reset this TV to more or less its factory condition.
Totally.
We did it from the user menu. We could have gone into the service menu and done a hard reset, but that would have probably disabled any networking that Leo had set up or anything like that.
This particular TV is set up for a pretty a busy network environment, and there's a lot of custom settings set up for that. So rather than reset the entire TV, we just did the picture settings by themselves, which will hopefully keep us safe. And when its owner comes home, won't freak out, which is the goal.
Exactly right. So just to finish up a little bit of what we're using here, we have the Konica Minolta CS200, we have the AV Foundry Video Forge pattern generator, and the software that I'm running is from a company called SpectraCal. It's called CalMan, and it controls the pattern generator and the meter, and actually automates quite a bit of the process. You use CalMan as well.
Totally. It's one of the best software packages out there for people who need something that just handles a variety of different hardware tools. And like you said, it does provide a bit of automation in terms of doing the measurement systems. And on some TVs now, there's actually an auto cal function which will take over the majority of what you're doing to give you more time to look at, put more eyes on the screen rather than spend more time on your notebook looking at the test results per se.
Exactly. Although the software, this CalMan software, does produce some very nice graphs of test results, which we will publish on the website. And you'll be able to see the exact results. Where I'm also going to notate what we get, what we end up with in terms of settings, and we'll publish those as well.
That's a good idea too, because in case if the TV ever gets reset again and you can't make the drive out here to redo the TV, you could just say, oh, I have a record of exactly what settings there were, and you can just take the remote, and almost anybody could do that at that point. But it's good to have that record. If you've gone to the trouble to have a custom calibration done, save that record of what those settings are just in case. Or in the future, if the TV has to be reset, maybe it aged and you want to redo it, at least you have a starting point to go from.
Exactly right. So we're going to start with the basic picture settings. So I'm going to sit at my computer and
I'm going to come around this side.
Come around this side. Now, I have some basic calibration patterns here that I'm going to take a look at. Now, as we look at the menu, I'm going to pull up the menu here. And the picture menu is where we're going to stay. And you see several settings here. One is picture mode. Now, picture mode, if you do nothing else, picture mode is what you want to select, either what's called movie in this case, or cinema. That's going to get you closest to what is considered accurate on any TV.
Exactly. At the factory, anything labeled movie or cinema typically is going to be the mode that was factory calibrated to be the most accurate.
That's right.
And
when it comes out of the box, it's usually either standard or, if you're really unlucky, vivid or dynamic. And that's going to just look cartoonish.
It can. Although in bright daytime settings, I'll let those slide. You can use those modes if you really want to blast the picture quality and to defeat, maybe you got a bright sunny day and you're trying to watch, the game on the weekend.
Football game,
and you got people crowded around. In those situations, in a bright room, you can go ahead and play with the other settings. But for critical viewing, get into the movie mode if nothing else. If you can't do a calibration, at least use one of those picture presets.
Exactly. So that's the first step, the first layer of making sure that you're looking at an accurate picture. The next step is to do these settings. Now, I don't know about you, but most of the time the menus start with contrast, but I normally start with brightness.
That is arguably the most important setting, so it's best to get that right. They're interactive in terms of brightness and contrast.
Very good point.
You mess with one, you should definitely check the other one because they are interactive. And if you go ahead and say crank the brightness way up, chances are the contrast setting is going to appear brighter than it was previously, or vice versa.
Exactly. Now, the way I learned these controls, if they're operating as they should, the brightness control takes the lowest light level and the highest light level, otherwise known as the dynamic range, and moves them both up and down together. Whereas the contrast control moves only the white level up and down. So it gives you more or less contrast, as opposed to brightness, which gives you a more or less bright picture all the way around.
That's been my experience too.
Exactly. Not all TV makers do it that way.
Totally.
But we'll start with that assumption.
And the contrast and brightness settings are arguably the place you should start if you're going to do your own setups. As far as of all the picture controls, and they happen to be right at the top usually on the menu.
That's right.
It makes it easy to get to.
That's right. So we want to make sure you understand, don't be scared of going in the menu. You can't hurt anything.
Nah. There's always a reset button.
There's always a reset button, which we just pushed before we started the show. So, okay, we're going to go into the menu. We're going to start with the brightness control. And because we are calibrating this for dark room critical viewing, we're going to have to turn off the lights.
Yeah, just so we can see very small changes in the black level or the brightness setup.
Exactly.
Sometimes the step between proper and improper is so small, you really have to have your eyes adjusted properly, and the only time you can really see it is in a dark room, or see it properly.
That's right. So we're going to set the brightness control, and we're using this very dark pattern, and you can see there's a bunch of numbers 0 through 23, and what we want to end up doing is I'm pulling up the brightness way too high,
but that makes it visible though on camera so people can see what we're looking at actually. And
exactly, and you see these bars that are numbered 0 through 23, those are actually the brightness levels at the low end of the light spectrum.
Yep, levels 0 through 23, and literally levels 16 and lower should be invisible. 17 should be the lightest thing you see.
The darkest thing you see.
the darkest
but
thing you see.
But slightly lighter than 16.
Yeah, 16 should be just completely, it should blend into the background along with 15, 14, 13 on down.
And on down.
Yeah.
So we're gonna now set this properly. It was 45 was the default. So let's see, and that looked slightly high to me, so.
Oh really? I thought that was just a touch low.
A touch low, I'm sorry, you're right. So I'm bringing it down, I still see 16.
I see 10 and 11,
yeah.
There goes 13, 14.
15 is barely visible.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'd take it down
one more.
I think 15's still there.
Yeah, 16's still there, down on one more. What do you think about that?
That's pretty close.
Okay, so we're going to call it 48.
Maybe
one more, 47. Yep. I can hardly see 17 now.
I can barely see 17.
Okay, but you can see it?
Yeah.
And bring it up, then I can see 16. Okay, I'll accept 47.
You will if you have to, get right up on the screen to see it too. And if you're calibrating in plasma, you can also see noise in the darkest grays.
That's right.
So
DLPs as well.
Totally.
DLP projectors.
Plasma displays though, you want to turn down that brightness setting until the noise even disappears, and you should then see noise in, say, the lightest or the darkest gray that's visible, like 17 in this case.
Right.
Should be nothing on 16. 17's where either a little bit of noise on a plasma, or in this case, we're getting just a slight touch.
So I'm looking up right at the screen, and I'm seeing no 16. I'm seeing just barely 17 here.
I like that.
So I think That's where we want it to be.
Totally. And you know what? You might be able to go up one more notch if the room is not perfectly dark, but this is where it's supposed to be set correctly, and this will give you really good dark detail, but not sacrificing any detail at the same point. We're not setting the darkness or the brightness so low that we're crushing dark detail.
Right, exactly, which is really what we want to avoid.
Totally. Where shadows look too dark or they just overwhelm a scene.
Now the menu just disappeared off the screen.
Totally, and that menu is insanely bright.
It's insanely bright, and now I can see 16.
Yeah, and I think I can almost see 15.
Right.
If I
So
put my notebook
that
out of the
means
way.
we probably have to bring it down another notch or two.
That'll be funny if 45 ends up being the correct value. Another good reason to check your picture preset, especially the movie or the cinema mode, is because those settings might be well optimized already. And
okay, you know what? I'm going to go for 45, which was the default.
Yep.
And then I'm going to exit out of the menu.
I have no problems with defaults. It makes life easy.
It does.
That's pretty dark.
I don't barely see now 17.
It should be barely visible, but
it is.
And 16 should just be gone.
It's not quite. It's not quite. I might even turn it down one more. What do you think?
We can do it.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
we'll actually turn it down one more. I'm kind of surprised, but okay. So we'll take 45. We'll go down to 44.
I don't think we should go any lower than that.
No,
but
I
let's
agree.
See. That is, you should be able to adjust the. That might be too much.
Yeah, because I can't even see 17. I'm going to go back to 45.
Yeah, that took a jump. It took a larger jump because it suddenly wiped out 17.
And that's an interesting thing about some of these TVs, that one click can make a big difference.
Totally.
So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to...
There's something I didn't think I'd need to request was, can I adjust the brightness of the menu system?
Right, exactly.
Your menus are way too bright.
Way too bright, because it really affects how your eye perceives that.
Totally.
Okay, now the next one is much easier to do, and it'll be much easier to shoot with the camera, which is white level. We're going to have plenty of light coming off the screen. And here we have the brightness levels as indicated by the numbers. Again, brightness is an 8-bit number, an 8-bit digital number. So it ultimately goes from 0 to 255.
That's it.
Now, in video land, in computer land, they use that whole range. In video land, they are supposed to use 16 to 235. And so we set the dark area so that 16 was the lowest, was black. It's called video black. And so you would think that we would set this contrast so that 235 was the lightest we could see. But we don't.
No, we'd like to expose those even brighter shades of white and gray, just because there's the potential for detail to be in the signal.
Exactly. Where the video standard says you shouldn't go above 235 in brightness, but people do. Particularly, there are particular scenes of what's the Art of Flight? You know that snowboarding movie?
Yes.
With all the snow. There's lots of stuff above 235 in that movie.
Now, technically, sure, you probably shouldn't see that detail in particular, but why not expose that? It is there in the signal.
It is there sometimes in the signal. So we want to
find it best to properly represent it. So.
Exactly. So whereas
dark detail, I have that hard line with.
Hard line at 16,
but the bright
detail we want to go up as high as we can.
Totally.
So I'm going to now go to contrast, which is the bright level, and I'm just going to show you, if I go up to 100, well now Samsung actually does a pretty good job of retaining. You can see these bands, 250 is visible, 251 is visible, 252, 253, these last few aren't really visible. And if we bring contrast down, they start becoming just barely visible.
Totally.
So I'm not opposed, particularly on Samsung TVs, of maxing it out.
You can.
Because there's no reason not to, because you see most of the detail. I don't know, I might back it off.
I would question too on like 246 through 248, you get a color shift slightly where if you crank contrast up too much, some of the grays can start to become pink or even shades of green.
That's true.
And if you do see that, back it down a little bit. And I'm just of the opinion on contrast specifically, not to set it at 100%. Leave like 10% for in the future that you can always go ahead and ramp it back up, say in 5 years or something. But
right. that's a good point.
Every TV is different, though.
No, that's a good point. So I'm happy to leave it at its default of 95.
That seems good.
And that's also very nice because that means we don't have to go back and look at brightness again because the contrast was at 95 when we set brightness.
Samsung did a good job.
They did. I really think so. So the next two controls that we're going to set are called color and tint. Color and tint. Color is the saturation, how saturated the colors are, how deep they are, whereas tint controls
hue,
whether or not it's more reddish or more greenish typically. And we look at a pattern such as this. Now, if you get a disc like Spears and Munsell HD Benchmark or the Joe Kane Digital Video Essentials disc, they come with a blue filter that you put over your eyes, and you look at this in just what's called the blue channel. You just want to look at the blue pixels. Now, this TV happens to have something called blue only mode, which is really cool.
It's awesome.
And it's much better to use than a filter. So we are going to, let's see, where is it? It is in advanced settings, and it is RGB only mode.
There we go.
And we are going to look, notice how now all we see is blue, here all we see is green, and here all we see is red. And we typically look at the blue channel only to see whether the color and tint settings are correct. Now what we want is you might have remembered that these bars consist of two parts, an upper part and a lower part. We want them in blue only mode like this to look exactly the same, and they pretty much do. But I'm gonna de-emphasize or misset this
Totally.
so that people can see. If I turn up the contrast or the saturation way too much, look what happens.
Totally. Cyan and magenta are the two colors you end up looking at for a color setup, and basically when you look at it through a blue filter, it should look identical if it's set up properly. You shouldn't see a difference in brightness between the cyan and magenta color tests.
Right. Whereas here, I've whacked it out.
Or in the case of color, actually, it's blue and white that you end up looking at. For tint, it's cyan and magenta.
Right.
And either way, through the blue filter, you adjust it until they look identical, both halves of the pattern.
So here it is totally misadjusted, and I'm going to bring it back down to where it's most. And what I tend to do is I tend to rock it back and forth. So there it's too low, there it's too high, and there it's about right. 50 was the default, and it's about right, don't you think?
That's pretty close. I also find too, if I just squint a little bit to help blur it, it makes subtle differentiation really a little easier for me anyway.
Yeah. So if I even go up a couple of notches, it's not as good as there, and I go down a couple of notches. I might put it at 49 or 50. I think 50's fine.
You know that. I hate to say it, but I think they did get that one on
just
about spot on too.
And you do the exact same thing with the tint control, which kind of goes, notice it says G50/R50. That's whether or not it's going towards green or whether or not it's going towards red. So I'm going to push it towards red. Notice how the bars get whacked out, and I push it towards green, and the bars get whacked out again. So once again, now on a modern TV, you normally don't have to even touch the tint control.
Exactly.
They've done a good job in the last few years of making the tint control default correct. So you normally don't have to touch it, and we don't have to here in this case. It's looking fine. Okay, then the final control in the basic user settings is called sharpness. And we want to get out of blue only mode here, so let me...
Goodbye, blue.
Goodbye, blue. Blue is on his way out.
I miss the blue modes when I come across a TV that doesn't have them.
Oh yeah. See, because the blue filters may or may not correspond with the blue that the TV is putting out. And that's the problem with using blue filters, particularly with LCD TVs.
Totally.
They don't necessarily go well with these blue filters. So here we go. I'm going to turn this off for the moment, and I'm going to point something out here. Now we've got the sharpness at default too. Notice that the other 4 controls that we've set so far have been very close to correct in their default settings. Not so sharpness.
No, this is
pretty weird, isn't it? Take a look at this pattern.
People like edgy pictures.
Yeah. And you'll notice these black lines have little white halos around them.
Totally.
Can you see that in the camera?
You can crank up the sharpness too.
All right, let's
really
crank up the sharpness.
Exaggeration.
Go ahead.
I've got it.
Okay, the default is 20.
So around every edge of the black lines, everything just gets it's an edge enhancement.
Yes, it's this artifact is called ringing, and it manifests itself as these bright. Now we're really cranking the sharpness, and you can really see the bright white lines around the black.
That is not in the video signal. That's all being added by the TV.
By the TV, correct. So we want to set the sharpness control at its highest value, in which those halos are invisible. And right now we're setting it at 0, and even if we crank it up to, I mean, even at 10, I bet you they're there a little bit.
Yeah. There's 10.
And it's not bad. I don't really see them. Go crank up a little bit more.
I'm starting to see
Now you're starting to see it at 14. So
10 wasn't bad.
10 wasn't bad.
There's a little touch of it there. But
Yeah, you know what? Maybe go down to 5. I see it a little bit there.
where I notice sharpness artifacts the most is on regular television, where there's a little bit of compression. Anywhere you get a compression or a noise artifact on the screen,
right.
Because then every bit of noise then gets an edge enhancement, and it really can distort the image quality, and it just detracts. You're suddenly, it can really make it look strange, and you really won't understand why. But don't be afraid to play with the sharpness setting, especially turning it down.
Yes, especially turning it down.
Try off first.
Exactly. You talk about compression with streaming media, it's even worse. Because streaming media from Netflix or whatever, much more compressed even than
Because you think about all those little blocks that can appear in the video signal when the compression goes a little crazy.
Yeah.
And every one of those is going to get a nice white edge to it. Or if there were white lines, you'd get black edges. It's literally the AB.
opposite.
Oh, it's an inch. It has its purpose. You shouldn't turn it down just to 0 or as low as it can go by default.
Because occasionally that'll soften the picture.
Totally. There are TVs that just do horrible things when you turn it down too low. But at the same point, you don't want it up any higher than necessary.
Exactly. Now, again, the Spears and Munsell disc and the Joe Kane disc all have patterns like this.
Totally.
That let you set this adjustment. We're using, again, the pattern generator just because we can control it. I can control it from the computer.
Oh, it's so nice.
It's so nice.
Everyone should have a nice pattern generator.
Indeed. Of course, they aren't cheap, so.
No, not yet.
Okay, so we've now set the basic user controls. We can now go. This, by the way, will get you typically 85% of the way towards the absolute best a TV can do.
It's hard to say. I'm real partial to a good grayscale, and if that's not right, everything looks weird. So
Right.
yeah, you can get this part right, but to get the next section that we're going to be touching upon proper, it really requires some kind of a meter to read it. It's hard to do this by eyeball, although the presets, just by looking at presets on a TV, you can usually see which one is the better of the presets, the one that's most natural looking.
Right, exactly, and particularly flesh tones, skin tones. So you're going to want to look, if you do it by eye, which I don't recommend doing what we're about to do by eye specifically, but if you're looking at the presets, and we can take a look real quick at the presets. We looked first at the picture mode presets, and the movie mode is going to be the closest to accurate. But try some other ones while looking at people. You know, our eyes as humans are very finely attuned to skin tones, the way people look. And so when you try these different picture modes, you're going to find that some people, the people will look too red or too blue or something. So that's one way to do it. Now, we also have in the thing that we're going to be looking at now, Robert referred to grayscale, which is how does the TV reproduce black to white and all of the shades of gray in between. And some people refer to this as color temperature, and I'm just looking to see if we have color temperature there.
White balance?
No, I think it's color tone is the preset.
Oh, you're right.
So in the Samsung, we're now in the picture options submenu, and we see that color tone is set to warm 2. Now color tone is another term, is Samsung's term for color temperature. which refers, it's kind of a technical term, it refers to how the white, where the white point is in things. Is it a little reddish? Is it a little bluish? Is it really neutral white? And oddly, you would think if we look in this mode, this color tone presets, we have 4 settings that we can choose: cool, standard, warm 1, warm 2. And cool typically gives the whites a blue cast. Warm typically gives the whites a reddish cast. Standard, you'd think, would be neutral. But it turns out that most TVs, and the Samsung's no exception, that the warm color temperature is actually closest to correct, closest to neutral. Why that is, I don't know.
And all of the standards that we're talking about too, it's how the movie was originally, or whatever content you look at, be it television broadcast or a Blu-ray disc or a DVD, it's how that content was originally produced and how they set it up in terms of color levels, in terms of color temperatures, detail levels. It's produced that way, so we're setting up the TV to match it as closely as possible.
Exactly.
So we recreate that experience. Just like the director or the producer or the film editor was sitting in the bay looking at a calibrated monitor when they put the movie together, we're trying our best to recreate that experience.
Exactly. We want to reproduce what the director saw when they made the movie. Now, I'm going to look at a grayscale pattern here before we get into this. So here we have what's called a stepped grayscale, and you can see from black on the left to white on the right. Now, I'm going to go back into the menu and just show you what happens when you select these different color modes.
I think that TV's overscanning too. Something else we need to check.
Oh, we better check that too. Good point. Okay, we'll take care of that in a minute. No, it's not this one. It is. I think. Oh, that takes me totally out. Sorry.
That's all right.
Forgotten where the back out one step rather than back out all the way is. So we're going to go to picture options. That's where color tone is. Now I'm going to show you what happens. Notice take a look. Now the gray scale, the stepped gray scale, it looks pretty neutral. We shoot it up here a little bit and it might look more neutral to you, but that's only in comparison to the previous one. That's actually a little blue. And we go up here, it's even bluer. And we go to cool and it's really blue.
Yeah, and that is the store mode right there.
That's right. This is the mode that the TV is going to be in on the store showroom floor, because blue attracts your eye more immediately. And so they put these TVs in what's called torch mode. So they're as bright as possible and as blue as possible. But for accuracy, we want that. And we're going to measure that to make sure that it's correct.
Totally.
But I just wanted to show you what the different color tone presets or color temperature presets looked like and what they did. Okay, so now we're going to get into calibration, real calibration. This is the part where you don't really want to do this by yourself unless you have this kind of equipment and some training. Right? Are you ISF or THX?
Both.
Both.
Done it all.
I have
THX 1 and 2 and ISF.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably
ISF is the Imaging Science Foundation.
Totally.
THX is THX. We all know THX. And they both offer courses to train calibrators. And so we've both been through those courses. So they aren't cheap.
No.
Neither is this equipment.
No.
Which is why if you want to have this next step done, you're going to spend several $100s to hire a professional to do it.
There are kits you can buy that you can get basic. You can get like a consumer level version of this software with a more standardized, say like a puck device for reading color at a much lower price point, but it's not going to have all the features and probably won't have
as accurate.
It won't have the performance of a system like this, like the CS200 from Konica Minolta. It's just a high-end colorimeter. The ones that you might be able to buy for $150, $200, it'll get you close, and as long as you're dealing with the brighter shades of gray, you're going to be able to measure those fairly accurately. But if you're looking for absolute precision, you got to step up and get either better hardware or call in a professional to do it.
Exactly.
Totally.
Exactly. Okay, so...
And I promise to quit saying totally. If I say it one more time, it's going to become a drinking contest.
Right. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do what's called a pre-calibration run. I'm going to, this software automates the whole process, very nice. And I'm just going to take a set of measurements of the grayscale and the color points and see where we are. So here we go. So you hear this little shutter sound in the Minolta, which is reading the different light levels here. The black around these windows, these gray windows, is already very black, and is the what's called the interstitial, the black screen between the windows.
Yeah, if you've ever seen an LCD in a dark room, when it goes to like a black screen, as long as the LCD is not completely turning off the backlight system, you'll always see some glowing gray or some light leaking in from the edges, and you do not see much of anything with this screen, I will tell you. The black is black. It is, it's as dark as any plasma I've seen.
Oh, yeah, at least.
Darker than most plasmas.
Yeah, I would say, except possibly the Kuro and the ZT and VT60s currently. What we're seeing here is the balance of red, green, and blue within gray. And here now we're taking a look at what the colors are doing. So what this screen is showing us, this part of the screen, is the error in the color. How close is it to where it's supposed to be? And the lower the bar, the better.
I think it skipped red.
Do you think it skipped red?
I don't see a dot on the CIE chart.
I do.
Oh, you do?
No, you know what? It might have skipped red.
So that's a good color result, though. Right off the bat.
Except for red,
Yeah.
which apparently it skipped for some reason. This is all superb. Really, really good.
Low errors.
Low errors. You might see a green line here. If you can see this green line, that anything below that is imperceptible to the human eye.
But that's like half of the green line, which is great.
Which is great.
Very good result.
Yeah. Here we see what's called the CIE colorimetry chart. And it shows us the range of all the colors the human eye can perceive.
The whole arc, or the
whole arc, the whole
shark fin.
shape, yeah, the whole shark fin shape is every color the human eye can see. This triangle is what the TV can reproduce.
And that's the standard. That triangle's the standard for video. In terms of everything you buy, rent, and watch, it's all produced on that standard of just that triangle. Not the whole color space that we can perceive, but a small subset of that, actually.
Right.
For bandwidth concerns and more than anything, really. But also, it's just the system we've lived with for so long.
Yeah,
and there are newer systems coming that will hopefully expand that palette of colors.
That's right. This triangle is what's called the color gamut.
Totally. That's the palette available.
The palette available. And the UHD, or 4K, might very well have a much larger triangle and be able to reproduce a much larger, wider range of colors. Now let's take a look at this piece over here. We see at different brightness levels, 20% of total of maximum brightness, 30%, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80.
The shades of gray.
These are shades of gray, brighter, brighter, brighter as the number gets higher. And as you may know, televisions reproduce all the colors within this triangle, including white or gray, by combining red, green, and blue. And because that's all that the TV can produce. All it has is a red pixel, a green subpixel, a green subpixel, and a blue subpixel. Now, white should be equal levels of red, green, and blue. And we can see here that they're not exactly.
A little red heavy.
A little red heavy, a little blue deficient.
Yep, it gets a little green heavy too, towards
the brighter side, a little green heavy. So that's what a professional calibration can fix, presumably. And I'm pretty sure we'll be able to do it.
I have
faith.
confidence in this. I think this TV will tune up quite nicely.
Right. Here we see the color temperature. Now color temperature is a weird thing that I don't really use much anymore, because the ideal color temperature is supposedly 6,500 kelvins, which is is the absolute temperature scale. Color temperature is derived from a theoretical object called a black body, and when you heat the black body up to certain temperatures, it will glow certain colors.
Like red hot.
Like red hot. But red hot is going to be maybe 5,000 degrees Kelvin. White hot is about 6,500 degrees Kelvin. Blue hot is like 9,000 or 10,000 degrees Kelvin. So that's what color temperature really is referring to. And the ideal for television is 6,500 K or 6,500 kelvins.
Another reason we really don't pay attention to color temperature anymore, or we don't take it too literal, is that color temperature could be a variety of different colors.
That's right.
There are a variety of colors that can make a 6,000 K white sample or something.
Exactly. So if you can measure 6,500 degrees Kelvin or 6,500 K, it might look a little green or it might look a little magenta. It's actually a line. So what we want is we want a point. We want that white point right there to be at a particular location in this graph. And that's not represented by color temperature. It's represented by a term called D65. So this little black square right there in the middle of that triangle is D65. And as we can see, this white dot, which was the measured white level, is ever so slightly towards green. And that's at 100 or 90 or so, or 80 maybe. So, and we can see here that green, there's a little more green than there should be, and a little less blue, which is why this dot is kind of pushed up towards green. Finally, we have this window here, which tells us the error in the white or the gray scale. And once again, if it's under green, we can't see it. And low brightness levels, it's under green, but then starting at about 50% and moving up to 90%, it's over green and even gets into above yellow. So we can improve this.
I think so.
We can. So that's what we're going to do.
One of the goals too is just to reduce, in the grayscale balance, you want to reduce green errors as much as possible. If you have to have an error, you want it to go blue.
Right.
Just simply because of our eyes and what colors we perceive more strongly than others. Green is the color we perceive most strongly, and having too much green in the picture, you will notice that in everything from skin tones to hair to you name it. It'll quickly make things look unnatural. Whereas if you have a slight plus blue error, it's less noticeable. Your eyes are less sensitive to blue shades than they are the other two primary colors.
Right. Okay, so we're going to start. The thing to do is to start with the grayscale, and I'm just going to take another.
I did want to just check the overscan. And
yeah.
There's a couple other video processing
Good
settings.
point.
So I just
Go right ahead.
I'm going to nuke these real quick.
Yeah.
Things I always do to TVs.
And Robert makes an excellent point. Most TVs have something called overscan, and what that does is it zooms into the picture a little bit, it expands the picture a little bit, and crops off the edges a little bit. The reason is these days is that there's a digital, and it's screen fit is the one.
Don't trust 16 by 9.
Right.
16 by 9 sounds correct, and it's the right shape, but it's slightly about 5%. It's stretching the video image off the edge of the screen.
And cropping off. Now this does two things. One is it crops out a little bit of the image. Second of all, it actually does something called scaling, which can distort things in the picture that you do see. So you want what's called one-to-one mode or pixel-to-pixel mode, such that every single pixel is being used exactly as it's coming off the source device, be it a Blu-ray or whatever.
You can lose picture detail by leaving overscan enabled with that 5% scaling of the picture.
Yep.
You can lose half of the resolution on the screen very easily, and
it makes
turn it off.
Makes the picture softer.
Yep.
Now, what you will see when you're watching cable or satellite occasionally, you'll see little what I call digital hash up at the top of the screen, which is part of the metadata that's coming from the broadcaster and synchronization and doing some other things. So you will see that occasionally when you turn overscan off, but it's a small price to pay for the much sharper picture.
And complain to your broadcaster, that hash at the top should not be visible. That's them making a mistake sending you the picture, and it's probably not even your cable or satellite provider.
Right.
It's the actual broadcaster leaving that in the signal. Their engineers are screwing up.
Right.
And call them on it.
Right.
And leave your set on In this case, it's Just Scan or Screen Fit, or there's a variety of names for it.
Each manufacturer has their own name for the one-to-one or pixel mode.
Panasonic TVs are probably the hardest to do because there's two different settings. And they're both it's just a mess. But
Yeah.
that's what they have.
And it's not the default.
No.
As it isn't here either.
No. Picture options. I tend to turn off all of the noise reduction.
Good point. Good point.
I just turn it off. It's just, I'd rather see the noise on the screen. Usually with broadcast television, there's going to be a little noise, and it's usually MPEG noise being compression noise, or this digital clean view is likely an analog noise reduction, or avoid distracting lines and flicker. Either way, I'd rather have a little bit of noise because there's a chance if you enable these functions, it will soften the picture quality and do more harm than good. So
now before we leave this menu,
there's one other setting here too, Auto Motion Plus, baby.
Well, let's talk about Auto Motion Plus in a second.
Okay.
HDMI black level is the other one I want to take a look at.
Usually never mess with it unless it's
exactly right. I'm going to put the black back on the screen, and unfortunately, that particular menu item does not make the rest of the menu disappear.
Okay, we had it correct.
It wasn't low.
So I'm going to exit out of this and just see if there's a difference.
Just see what happens in normal mode.
Holy,
Notice you can see so much below 16 that you're not supposed to see.
It's practically visible down to almost 2.
Exactly.
And we had it set so 16 and below were pitch black. So that setting I'm going to go right back in
back
there.
into low.
Put it back the way it was.
I just wanted to point it out to people. Okay, now Auto Motion Plus.
Yeah.
Auto Motion Plus is Samsung's name for what is generically called frame interpolation. This is the bane of LCD TV's existence. Basically what it does is
the smoothing effect.
It's a smoothing effect. It takes the incoming frames, each frame, 60 frames per second, and it takes a look at each frame and it says, what's moving in this frame? Oh, that ball is flying across the air. Okay, in this frame, it's here. In the next frame, it's there. I'm going to insert a frame in between the two where the ball is halfway between those two places. Now, that makes the motion smoother.
Totally. And it helps improve clarity of the picture.
Yes.
Specifically just to compete with the plasma folks, because plasma TVs never had this problem
to begin with.
And when you did motion on early LCD televisions, anytime anything moved, it smeared. So they had to come up with something to clarify the picture more.
Right.
And that's this frame interpolation, frame insertion technologies. And the beauty of what Samsung's doing, though, is that they allow you to control it separately for video sources and for film sources.
The real problem with frame interpolation is applying it to 24 frame per second movies, because then it makes them look like soap operas, which causes what we call the soap opera effect. And people hate that far more than they like the smoothing results of doing it this way. You know what? I'm sending it a 24 frame per second image.
Oops.
So
there we go.
There we go.
We could use the clear motion, but I figure we'll just. I always usually just leave the blur at default.
Okay.
Whoops. Jeez. That's the wrong button.
Wrong button.
Wrong button. There we go.
Auto Motion Plus. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to
and the judder reduction specific for film.
And turn that down to 0.
This is the one or at least.
Lower.
Very low. And I sometimes leave it at 1, but I'll just go ahead and take it to 0 on this one.
So the judder reduction is for 24 frames per second, and the blur reduction is for 30 or 60 frames per second.
Totally.
With 30 or 60 frames per second, which is what you get with video, stuff that's shot already on video, the soap opera effect isn't such a problem because it's already shot on video. It looks like video already, so it's not going to be a problem. But movies, a lot of people object to movies looking like they were shot on video, and I can understand why.
I immediately go, oh wait, this looks wrong,
right?
And it's not the way it's supposed to look,
right?
But for, like you said, for sports content and for other content,
right, that's shot on video to begin with,
give the LCD an advantage and turn that technology on. This TV at least lets you adjust them separately, and that's the one thing I really appreciate.
Well, Samsung's LCDs do as well. And you might wonder, well, wait, this is an OLED, so why do we even need to worry about this? Well, because the OLED works very similar to the way an LCD does. It's what's called a sample and hold technology. So each frame is displayed on the screen for the entire length of the frame, as opposed to plasma, which flashes the frame onto the screen 10 times per frame. It's on and then off, then on, then off, then on, then off. And that in itself causes this motion blur to not really be a problem. LCD TVs and OLEDs both are sample and hold technologies, which means that this motion blur still can be a problem. Now, didn't you tell me that this TV also does black frame insertion?
It does.
Okay, so one way to get rid of motion blur, instead of interpolating frames and putting a new frame in between the existing frames with the ball halfway between where it was in one frame versus the next, you can instead insert black frames, kind of do what plasma does. Not as many times as plasma does, but you can insert black frames in between the actual frames so that the picture frames are not on the screen the entire time. And that does tend to help motion blur as well.
Also, too, for this TV, because it's so bright, OLEDs in general, that brief blanking of the screen also just makes it easier on your eyes, and it gives your eyes, at least my understanding is, it gives your eyes a chance to reset so that the next frame that's appearing, your eyes are more ready for it. At least that's how the people in the know have described the technology to me.
Hey, let's take a break from all that calibration for a moment and thank our sponsor for this episode, which is ProXPN. ProXPN is a virtual private network that works with almost any internet connection, keeping your communications over the internet private and secure. It creates a secure encrypted tunnel through which all of your data flows back and forth. Any online application can work with ProXPN, including your web browser, email, file sharing, and instant messaging programs. ProXPN keeps everything you do online hidden from prying eyes. And we know how important that is these days with all the news about government spying and so on and so forth. It disguises your physical location and gives you unfettered access to any website or online service, no matter where you live or travel to. This encryption tunnel I mentioned uses 512-bit encryption, which should keep things mighty secure for a good long time. And it works with OpenVPN or PPTP. You choose. You can protect yourself against your ISP's 6 strikes rule, and it keeps your personal internet usage private at work. Now, how important is that? It bypasses internet filtering and blocked websites, and it even bypasses geographical locations for internet content and online video with worldwide servers in the US, UK, Asia, and more. ProXPN makes your internet connection truly region-free. There's software for Windows and Mac that offer advanced controls, allowing you to select programs and ports you want to anonymously route through ProXPN servers. ProXPN also works with your iOS or Android device, allowing you to use your data plan or public and corporate Wi-Fi with complete and total privacy on the go. There's even a new ProXPN app for Android in the Google Play Store that supports OpenVPN. Steve Gibson, our own security expert here at TWiT, gave it a great review on Security Now. So go to proxpn.com/twit for more information and to sign up. ProXPN premium accounts are normally $9.95 a month or $74.95 for the entire year. But we've got a special offer. Use the promo code HTG and receive 20% off the lifetime of your account. That's less than $5 a month on the yearly plan. And if you're not satisfied, you can cancel within 7 days for a full refund. So go to proxpn.com/twit and sign up with the code HTG. We thank ProXPN very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks and the entire TWiT network. And now, back to calibrating Leo's OLED TV.
A couple more things I want to point out here before we actually go to the calibration. One is I retook the measurements that we had missed. For some reason, the software missed. I think it's because the TV is actually responding very slowly to changing patterns. And so the software thought the pattern was up and it wasn't, and it just missed it. So I retook 40 and I retook 100, and we can see that the green, there's too much green. And I retook red, and we can see it's now well below the green line as well. So we now have a complete picture of what the movie mode looks like. The other thing I wanted to point out which we didn't look at before, was this window. This window right here is the gamma curve. And what the gamma curve does is it tells you, as you increase brightness from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 all the way up to 100, how does the screen respond to that? How much light does it output as the input signal increases? And typically it follows a curve that looks like this, which is what you want. Now we've seen this, the average gamma is identified here as 2.1. I personally like 2.2. Joe Kane prefers a 2.4. The higher the number, the slower the TV will come out of black. That's really what gamma determines, is how does the TV come out of black. As you increase from black to dark gray to lighter gray to white, if this curve is more curved, if you will,
Exactly.
It will come out of black slower. The other thing I want to point out that we haven't looked at yet is how much light is coming off that screen in bright white. And I'm going to put up a bright white pattern here.
Gamma settings too can also reflect if you're dealing with very large screen sizes.
Yes.
Sometimes you want to move the gamma point up because the screen can look too blown out a little bit, or when you start stretching an image out.
Right.
And it can add a little bit of extra punch to the black and keep the contrast looking contrasted.
Exactly.
Rather
That
than
is true.
more washed out.
We're wanting to find the happy medium.
The standard though is 2.2, and
Yes.
and that curve is matched to the response of the human eye. So
Exactly.
there's some cool science behind all of that. There's a reason, we chose the colors were chosen the way they were. There's a reason to have a curve like that, and it's basically to make it look as good as possible to human beings and other
Right.
people who are other creatures who
Creatures who can see, right?
perceive color in similar ways at least. So.
Now, the other thing I want to point out is that at 100% brightness, at full white brightness, this TV at the moment it's hard to see, but it's putting out 60.9 foot lamberts. Now, foot lamberts are a unit of measurement of brightness. Okay?
What's the max for a movie theater? Do they
Oh,
recommend?
the max for a movie theater they recommend is 14.
Right. So this is a little bright.
This is really, really bright.
Where are my sunglasses?
Now, in a bright room, in the day, we're at night here, but in the day, watching the football game, this might be very appropriate.
Totally.
But at night, where we are now, in a critical viewing environment, as we like to be in, you want that number to be more like 30 to 40. I like 30. David Katzmeyer likes 40. Fortunately, this TV can let you adjust things to lower that without having to change any of the contrast or brightness controls. It's the cell light. Now, Samsung TVs have this cell light feature. Notice that it just takes down the brightness.
But it's not changing like the contrast levels, or
Exactly.
it's just simply affecting how bright the overall image is, or not.
So, actually, I know what. No, I take it back. I'm going to.
It was at 11. I'm going to put that down to.
Yeah, but one thing we can do here is we can play the 100 IRE window, the 100% window, and I'm going to let the meter just take readings.
38.
Now we're at 38.
Then I went down to 5.
Going down to 5, and that will give us 33. Let's set it at 35, shall we? Now we're at 29, almost 30. Now we're at 38.
38 or lower.
Take it down one click.
Here's 5. That
That's
gets to
5.
32.
Okay, so that'll get us to 34.
There we go.
The good news is that when Leo's watching in a dark room, he can know to just go into this one control, the cell light control, and set it to 5. And when he's watching during the day, a football game or whatever, he can go in and turn this up to, 10 or whatever, and get a much brighter picture that will compete with ambient light and work just fine.
Now, a lot of TVs also incorporate ambient room light sensors as well that could handle that, maybe.
Maybe.
But I've had pretty poor luck in terms of getting adequate response out of a light sensor on a TV to closely match what you really want it to be. Some TVs provide really good overall controls in terms of being able to say, you know what, when it gets into a dark room, never go darker than this level, and then if it's in a bright environment, never go above this level. But it's kind of hit or miss in terms of if that room light sensor will actually work the way you want or not. And if not, you know what? Find that one specific setting. On an LCD, it's called backlight. On plasmas, they typically call it cell light or cell light level or something like that.
Exactly. Okay, I'm going to do one more pre-cal run just to get the data for our report.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to just let this thing do its thing. Okay, so that is our pre-calibration run. Now we will take a look and do the grayscale. Now the grayscale, as we said before, is how neutral is the white. And we saw that it isn't 100% perfectly neutral, and we can get it closer in the menu system, and I'm going to let Robert take care of that. And the way we do it is we measure well, do you want to use 2-point or 10-point? 10-point is going to take longer, but it does have a 10-point calibration system in this TV.
It depends on the TV. I've found that certain TVs, if the 2-point is a good pre-test and then to do 10-point. I've had TVs though where if you did the 2-point and then you did the 10-point, it ignored the 2-point, so there was no reason to even do that. You pick which one you just want to do.
Right. I should explain what this means. 2-point calibration basically means you're going to calibrate the levels of red, green, and blue at 2 points, 2 brightness levels from 0 to 100. And the 2 brightness levels you typically use are 30% and 80%. Most TVs give you that capability. Some TVs, like this one, give you the capability of calibrating individually each brightness level at 10% increments. So 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. I'm tending to think let's try the 2-point first and see what happens.
Agree.
Yeah. So we're going to start with 80. So go into white balance.
Oh, let me hold the remote up. So.
And we want to look at the gains. There are two. You can go back out one level. Let's explain what this is.
Return.
Okay, so you see 2 sets of red, green, and blue.
Yep, RGB
offset and RGB gain. Offset is what controls the low end of the brightness scale, so that's what we'll use for 30. Gain is what controls the high end of the brightness range, and so that's what we'll use for 80. So,
which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with 80.
Alrighty, so I'll get on to my gain measurements, and if I recall, there's a little too much green and lacking in blue.
Correct. So what I'm now doing is I'm just having this meter read 80 continuously. So we can see here that blue is still deficient and green is still a little high. So we want to increase blue, and these controls are interactive, which makes it a little interesting. You just kind of have to go back and forth. I'd probably take green down 1 or 2. And it's always, in my opinion, it's always better to reduce than increase when you can. Like EQ, like audio equalization.
That's a good point.
You know, always better to cut than to boost.
Let me drop that blue down.
Yeah, you drop that blue down one more click, and notice how close to even these are now. That's exactly what we want.
Give us a second. There we go. And maybe try red down just 1.
Maybe.
Yeah, it probably doesn't need it. Oops.
Sometimes one click will make a huge difference. But these are looking really good. You can see a more magnified view of it here.
And we also get the error result there too, which is
error. You want that bar to be as low as possible.
I think I would turn that back.
I'd bring red up one more.
Yep.
There. Yeah. See, 1 click.
That's probably about as good as we're going to get it with that.
Probably so. This error here is well under 1, which anything under 3 is indistinguishable.
If you get under 1, you're doing really well.
Really good. Okay, now we're going to do the low end. So we're going to stop.
And I'm going to go to the offset controls.
And you're going to go to the offset controls, and I'm going to do 30. Okay, so red we have way too much red. Not way too much, but too much red.
Take it down 1.
Yep.
Be patient while it remeasures.
Yep, and look at that. 1 click, and it went all of a sudden it's too low.
The darker grays are affected way more.
Yeah,
they're way more sensitive in terms of the
way
controls.
more sensitive.
So.
Yeah, exactly. So bring down blue a little bit, maybe.
And blue, go down 1.
Boom! It made a huge difference.
Yeah.
This is the frustrating part.
And I'm gonna try green offset just to see if it brings it back.
Bring green down 1. See what that does. Still, look at the error. The error is very low.
It is.
We're a little red deficient, but again, the error is low.
Switched. I'm gonna set that back up 1. See what happens.
Okay, see what happens.
I think it skyrockets. It skyrockets to, like, still the error is less. And we'll watch the error result too to see if it crept up.
It did creep up. Yeah, but it's still under 1. So, that would be good enough. But you and I are perfectionists, right?
Yes.
So we want this to be flat. We want this to be totally flat.
I'm just gonna.
So I'd say bring red back down.
Yeah.
And the software and the meter have to catch up a little bit. Okay. So again, as you said before, if you're going to have an error, you want it to be a little on the blue side.
And we'll take a look at the overall measurement too, to see how it affected everything.
Okay, so we notice our 30% error is very low, our 80% error is very low. Let's go back and check 80%, because this is an interactive situation. We're now going to take a look at 80%, and as it comes up, there it is. Let's see what it's doing. How did it? It didn't change very much. The error came up a little bit, but not too bad.
Really, but it brought the red down because of the red we brought down on the 30%.
Even though, see, the offsets control the low end and the gains control the high end, but they tend to overlap, so they do affect each other. But still, this looks pretty good. So let's take a whole grayscale.
Yeah, great error levels. I mean, 1/2 of 1.
It is really good.
And 3 is considered good. So
yeah, exactly.
We're doing really, really well.
We're really doing
Although
good.
we expect only the best.
That's right. Oh yeah, kill the menu too. Good idea.
Yeah. Menu be gone.
And that's another thing you have to keep in mind. That sometimes, in some cases, the menu on the screen actually affects the reading you get.
It's so annoying.
So annoying.
That
may in fact be true here. We'll see.
That's a star off right there.
Yeah.
That just makes it too difficult. Especially if you've got a TV where it's a pain to get into the menu system, or you're 6 menus deep to get to the setting you need. And you got to turn it all off.
You got to turn it all off.
Take a measurement, turn it all back on, make an adjustment, turn it all back off. That's not fun.
No.
I'm charging double.
I actually find this process to be somewhat meditative.
Oh, you ain't kidding.
and I actually enjoy it. This is an unusual situation for me, doing it with somebody, with a camera, talking about it all the time. Usually I'm just quiet. And it's like a meditative experience.
It's nice when especially if it's not your own equipment, but if you're at a client's house and you suddenly you can't spend 5 hours at somebody's place unless they want you to stay. But
exactly.
But it's easy to get caught up in it. You just get going, and it's like, you know what? I think I can do this a little bit better. I think I can adjust these settings.
Exactly.
There's always more content to look at. But this is the part, you get this done, and then you can get right into enjoying some video and other things that just show you the fruits of your labor, basically.
Exactly.
Go look at some of the content you're most familiar with, and then you should see some differences.
Which we will do very shortly. Take a look. This is much, much nicer than the original, and notice that all of these errors are under 1. We can go back and look at the pre-cal data
Average
run.
of 0.6.
0.6 of an error, which is really something.
That's pretty good.
Okay, there's our pre-calibration run.
Average of 3.
3.5.
Yep.
Almost 3.6. Notice this is much more jaggedy.
That wasn't a bad default either.
No,
some
it wasn't
TVs are
bad.
horribly misconfigured.
Yes, this is not bad. In the movie mode, in Warm 2, right?
Yep.
Warm 2 color tone.
You got it.
But now, here's our post-calibration. So much nicer, so much cleaner, everything under 1. The gamma is 2.1. Again, it's a little low. Does this TV have a gamma setting?
It does.
Yeah, gamma is in the advanced settings.
Yep.
So we're going to go into advanced settings, go down to gamma. So I don't think we need to do the 10-point white balance because this is perfectly fine.
That looks really good. And you know what? Usually I do that when the gamma is out of whack.
Right, exactly.
And that's where the 10-point can adjust, like, oh, you know what? The darkest portion of the curve is kind of messed up, or there's a spike there and there's no other way to get at it. You can't do it with a 2-point adjustment, but with a 10-point, you can zero right in on the problem spot and make an adjustment that way.
Right.
And
so unfortunately, Samsung does not give you gamma in the number that it's supposed to be.
yeah, it doesn't.
You know, it doesn't give you a 2.2 or a 2.4. It just gives you this arbitrary number.
I want to say taking it. See, I don't know which one will take
Which
it a little
one
higher.
will take it up? Well, with the one way to find out.
No, I'll go -1
We'll
first.
go -1 and we'll see what happens.
Hello, -1.
Once again, the gamma is how much light comes out of the TV when you input a certain brightness level.
Yep.
Another way to say it is coming out of black.
Because it's electrical signals. You have a variable voltage.
Right.
And as that voltage increases, the brightness level increases. That's how you.
Well,
determine-
actually, in this case, it's a digital. It's not a voltage. It's a digital number coming into the TV.
Oh, that is. But also in terms of how it relates of the curve of the graph, and it's not linear. It is not a 1-to-1 relationship in terms of input versus luminance or brightness.
Right.
It's about this curve that matches our vision.
Right.
As closely as possible.
Okay, notice now we have a gamma of 2.4. So just going -1 click got us from 2.1 to 2.4. Now this gives us a look at the gamma at different brightness levels.
There's an
this is
odd
an average, and there's an
spike.
odd spike at 30. So you know what? I'm going to say let's go back to 0
Okay.
because
I concur.
that's this history right here. There was a little bit of a dip in gamma at the high end, but I'm not too worried about gamma at the high end. I'm more worried about it at the low end. Because again, that helps determine shadow detail and whether or not you're crushing the blacks. So this is, I'm perfectly happy with this average gamma of 2.1. You can take a look here while Robert's doing that and see all the white points are really close to that D65 with one exception, and that is, I think that's 20%. And it's really not that bad. I mean, obviously, its error is still under 1, so we're perfectly fine. I like this grayscale quite a bit. And
Is it movie time?
it's close to movie time. One last thing we're going to do is look at color management.
I like this media room though. He's got a good setup for
He
it.
does.
Although I would suggest lowering the height of the TV.
I agree.
That's a different issue.
Yeah,
We'll
I
get
agree.
into
I
at another
agree.
point.
Yes, when the lights are up and we're taking a look at the setup here,
It's a uniquely shaped TV.
So, if we wanted to go in, I don't even know if this has a color management system, but if
I think it does.
it probably does, and we could maybe go in and futz around with it. Here again is the CIE diagram, and you can see the color points are very close to where they're supposed to be in these squares.
The square box represents
Square box
what it
where it's
should
supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right. Now, in this set of screens, we can see a lot more information. We can see, for example, this is called gamma luminance, and this indicates that the red is not as bright as it's supposed to be. The green is not quite as bright as it's supposed to be. The blue is a little brighter. It's a little more than it's supposed to be. Cyan, almost right on the money. Magenta and yellow, slightly less. This delta L indicates the error in luminance, okay? So the red error is 1.5. None of them are above 1. None of them are even close to 2, so it's not a problem. Delta C is the error in saturation, and red, it just barely reaches the point of perceptibility.
Totally. And even on the CIE chart, you can see the red point actually almost extends outside of the chart itself.
Exactly. And
close, but
saturation, by the way, can also be seen on the CIE chart if these dots, the closer these dots get to the outer edge of this curve, the more saturated they are. And the closer in towards white they are, the less saturated they are. Makes total sense, right? Because as you move red in towards white, it becomes kind of light red. It's less saturated. so the closer to the edge these colors are, these points are, then the more saturated they are.
It's like turning that color control up and down. It should almost be expanding or contracting all the points on the CIE chart.
Precisely. It basically, turning that color control up and down expands this triangle in and out. Delta H is the error in hue. Is this, how close is this point to where it's supposed to be? And again, red is the farthest out, and it's actually got its hue error is 4.5, which is, you know, we might be able to tone that in.
It's a bit oversaturated.
It's a bit well, I don't know which direction its hue is wrong.
Like probably going toward green.
Probably, yeah, probably, or I'm not sure.
Have to play with that.
Yeah, this right here is the overall error. And as we can see, red has the most error, but it's still 2.5. It's under 2.5.
The average 1.1 for across the board.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty decent.
Which is really decent. So we could go in and try and futz with the red a little bit.
And generally, say for the luminance levels, you're supposed to have the primary colors be fairly. You don't want the difference between the primary colors to be too great.
Right.
And then for like delta H, that would be more for the secondary colors is where that's most important. Getting the hue of things like yellow, cyan, and magenta nailed, that you want to focus on.
Right.
As far as what you would focus on regarding delta H values.
Which we don't have to worry about here because they're all
very, very good.
They're all very good.
Secondary colors are excellent on this TV.
Yeah. So the only one that I would even consider tweaking is red. And so.
See, but now the question is, when we go into custom, is it the same starting point that we had? That's the issue I run into.
So we're going to go to custom mode, and we're going to.
You want to take a quick measurement of this?
Yeah.
Because I'm just to make sure that at least it's close to what the auto mode is for Rec 709 and here.
Okay. So this is starting with the native color space. What we would have to do would be we would have to go in and seriously tweak each of these colors to get a slight improvement in red that we already had in auto. So I say stick in auto.
I would.
Okay.
Just unless we plan to be here for another couple hours.
Exactly.
Because this could go either way.
Exactly. So I'm going to say we're going to stick with
as much as I want to.
You know, if it were just me alone and I was in the meditative mood,
I'd be cracking a beer and saying, "Let's see what happens."
Let's see what happens.
But that looks great, and it's
really
an auto preset.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Actually, we can take a look at them real quick here.
I will say one thing though about the CIE results for the chart. It's only showing you though peak brightness values or peak values for the colors and for the white point. And there's a lot of it's good to know the different luminance levels of a particular color, or even
which Calman 5 will give you.
Yes.
I'm running Calman 4, and I'm sorry to say that I am. I wish I had 5.
And that's one of the neater color checking functions. I have it on my notebook, and I might fire up my meter here and stick it on there.
Well, we actually do want to see, to compare your meter with this one to see if they get anywhere close.
I'm going to use the i1 Pro from X-Rite, modified by SpectraCal, to include support for other device types. And this is really just a simple meter that reads light that comes in. It includes a couple of different heads too, so actually if I want to measure something like, I don't know, fabric or something like that, that could be to determine what color it is. I could do that as well, but I really just put this on a screen and it detects by essentially counting photons, which is really an accurate way to do it, although it can be a little slow. So that's the one downside compared to what Scott's using with his CS200.
However, we want to say that this meter, which is actually probably the one to get if you're not going to spend on it.
There's a newer version of this too. They've improved it a little bit in terms of low light performance and speed, but
it's $1,000.
Yeah,
it's not cheap.
And it's it's a lot cheaper than something like that. Than a CS200.
And this is a lot cheaper than the CS2000. So, you know, you get what you pay for.
CS2000 I've seen at facilities like Samsung owns one.
Right.
And it's $30,000 for something like that. And and the difference between that and what Scott has is really the ability to measure even darker shades of gray.
And
very low
narrower bands of color.
Yep.
It breaks up the color spectrum into these very, very fine bands. One of the advantages of a meter like this is when it's pushed up against the screen, you don't really need to turn off the lights. You do with mine. So there's one advantage right there. It did give you a point.
Yeah, it's just the dark rays it's super slow on.
Ah, right. The disadvantage of this meter is that it's quite a bit slower.
I usually leave the room. You take this equipment and you send it back to whoever sold it to you, and they hopefully will offer, they have even more advanced devices that can then verify that what it's measuring is what it's supposed to be measuring, or that it's accurate in terms of how it's functioning, be it for measuring a shade of gray or, you know, specific colors.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
It's slightly different.
But not very. But let's see. I'm going to...
And also I didn't really allow this stuff to warm up, but let me also do, let me do the color check too.
Yeah. I was just going to say the gamma curve
Very similar in the gamma.
looks similar to me.
That dip at 90.
Dip, yep, exactly.
But mine's showing a slight green bias, and you know what? I'm going to let it run one more time. Something I haven't verified yet is if this device is appropriate for OLED displays either. That's something I don't know.
Yeah. See, SpectraCal doesn't either because they've never had an OLED in their studio, in their facility.
Now, with your measurement tool, the CS200, it should be good with just about any display type, as far as I know.
Well, SpectraCal wasn't 100% sure
Okay.
about that. See, once again, because they've never had one in, so they don't really know.
So new technology and getting tools that are verified to work with the new technology
Exactly.
is an ongoing issue.
We're taking a little bit of a shot in the dark here with both of these meters. So I'm looking at all these errors, and they're all very low.
Fairly low, yeah. Average of 2 so far, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good for a default.
Yeah.
But like I said too, if I had calibrated the grayscale first, it would have helped the overall result. But you can see things are fairly on target, especially around the blue and cyan. It's pretty damn close actually through there.
Now this is CalMan 5. This is the next version beyond the one I'm using, and it actually keeps track of the colors at different brightness levels.
Yep,
Which is really cool.
Luminance sweeps I have as well, and this is kind of just a neat, or am I thinking saturation? Maybe I'm thinking saturation too. The luminance sweeps, excuse me, I'm thinking of two different things. The luminance sweeps are where it does all the shades of a color plotted on the same point, and then they all should be at the same point. Just
Right.
because the color is at a different brightness, it shouldn't change what the color is.
Correct.
So, but the other thing I like to check though are the saturation sweeps, where it's going to check from in to out, and
Right, exactly.
because it's interesting, you usually get curves in how the colors lay down, going from low saturation to high saturation.
Right.
All right, this is just about done. Oh, magenta, you look so good. This is
Like red's a little off,
red's the wacky one.
as it was here too.
Okay. And as it gets into the lower saturated values, it's pretty good. And when it got to peak red, it's spot on. See, that's why the peak values sometimes they're deceiving.
Deceptive, yeah.
Everything in the middle can be a little messed up, and
Yeah.
those are just as important. But this is not a terrible result. Damn, I like a good yellow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not bad. Overall errors, not bad. I now, though, am questioning the capability of this meter with this TV, but it's something I would like to investigate further, especially when it comes to the grayscale measurement, because there's a subtle difference, but a subtle but consistent difference in the grayscale, in particular this green line.
Yeah.
Mine's more green, and we are just about spot neutral with the CS200 readings.
Right. Right. Well, I don't think there's any way to really tell which one of these meters.
Let's look at some real-world content.
That's we're done with this.
I'm saving my results there.
Yeah, save your results. Save your results.
Save workflow. Oh, game mode, my game mode. Oh, don't do that, Jesus. What is that menu? That menu sucks. I'm sure it works for something really nicely, but where are you hiding game mode? Oh, is it under general? Yeah. Where can we hide it? Don't find
Okay,
that.
so game mode we need to turn on in order
Yeah.
to minimize input lag.
And it immediately nukes our calibration. It's really for... No, I mean, it's still there.
It's still there, yeah.
It's still there. It's just it's now turned off, which is fine if you're running a console game into it, but let me just kick on so we get signal. Hello?
Hello, signal.
Come on, baby. It's like the best device in the world. They couldn't have made this a switch. No, they had to make it a push button. 84.8. Not much of an improvement, really.
Not much.
I mean, it knocked about 50 milliseconds off, but still. 84.7. It is stable, though. It's not very variable or shrinking or gaining. Still, though, it knocked about 50 off, but still, that's considered on the high end. Anything above 40 milliseconds, really, it's getting into the point of being noticeable. For some games, it really doesn't matter, but for others, where your ability to hit the control and have it respond on screen, that's where you could run into some problems.
And 50, what was it, 80 some milliseconds?
81.6.
That's with game mode off?
On. Yeah. And then 180. 180.1.
Do one more time.
Yep. This one.
It's still not great.
No, but you know what? This reminds me a lot like a plasma. There's always a lot of processing going on in the back end of plasmas too. It's
Right.
rare. This is very similar actually to what I see with most plasma screens. So, what should we put in?
Well, let's see. I'm curious about. I brought Hidalgo, which has actually got some really nice detail work. The Wizard of Oz, the 70th anniversary restoration, is beautiful. And Life of Pi, I just bought it on the way here because I didn't have it yet, and it's so beautiful. We should try it. What do you got?
Here's everything I brought.
Oh, you brought a bunch of stuff. Master and Commander. Let's start with that.
I use that for 3D.
Yeah, understood.
Hugo's, and it's one of the few 3D movies I could sit through that I liked a lot.
Yeah. So, what we're looking for here, now here comes the scene. Look at that. Pure black. So what we're looking for here is...
Oh, good. This is shot on film.
Is how much detail can you see in those really dark parts?
Ninjas.
The black is so black.
It is. It takes some getting used to.
Just great.
I'm so used to some compromise and not having true black. You're always.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, you know what? Add a little room light.
Yeah, not for me. Look at that. Look at that.
That was nuts.
Man.
Big Buck Bunny. But just the intro to this alone, although it's like an open source animation, so you can actually show it.
Right. Which is why they chose it, no doubt. But it happens to have something good.
But this sequence in the very beginning, I'm almost sure they engineered as a black level test, because it pans down and it goes into and you should be able to see his face in the rabbit hole when it goes to it finally. But this also is just crazy detailed.
Oh yeah.
As far as all the little. And it's not that you can barely see his face inside that hole right there.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't, I would say that it's you've got your
brightness too low.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's some good subtle dark detail for an animated character, and Buck Bunny's pretty funny, I got to admit. At first, and these little anyway. I've clearly watched this stupid animation a few times.
I wanted to let you know that we did not do a 3D calibration. We did not calibrate the 3D mode of this TV, which would have to be done separately, which we could do. It would take a lot longer, and it's a real hassle because you have to take the meter, you have to put the glasses in front of the meter, and somehow affix them to the meter so that they stay put, which means bringing along a roll of tape, like blue painter's tape or something like that, and sticking it right on the meter like that, so that the meter is shooting through the glasses, because the glasses are going to change the brightness that your eye perceives and the color.
Exactly.
And we want to be able to measure what's going on as you're wearing the glasses. So we didn't do it. It's a pain in the butt.
We will. This TV's moving soon.
Yes.
So when the TV
moves,
we go 3D.
We'll move with it.
That's a different segment.
Right, exactly.
Well, wouldn't you know it, we ran out of battery power and media space as we were calibrating Leo's OLED TV. So I thought I'd come back into the studio and give you a little summary of what we found in all that time. We spent several hours with the TV, and generally speaking, it is a fabulous TV. We reset the picture controls and selected the movie picture mode, and the basic controls were actually very close to correct. which is a very good thing. It means really all you have to do is select the movie mode and you're pretty much good to go to a certain point. With the movie mode selected and the warm 2 color tone, the grayscale wasn't bad. The error was less than 3 in the lower half of the brightness range, and it crept up to about 5 or so in the upper half of the brightness range. It was a little deficient in blue and had a little too much green. So we decided that a calibration really was a good idea. And you really want to do that with a set that costs $9,000. Spending a few $100 on a professional calibration is not going to break the bank at that point. The black level measured 0. I mean, literally 0. We could not see that screen with a full field black image on the screen, which implies that the contrast ratio is infinite. What it really means is that the blacks are very deep and the picture is really going to pop off the screen, which it did. In fact, we haven't seen black levels like that since the old CRT days. The Pioneer Kuro got close. Some of the LED, LCD TVs get close. They can actually achieve that black level, but they have to turn off their LCDs, or LEDs rather. And so this TV doesn't have to do that, and so there's no discontinuity when that happens, which there is with LED LCDs. So in that sense, this is a superior performer in that regard, definitely. When we first did some measuring, we noticed that the peak white, the brightest white that could come off that set was over 60 foot Lamberts, which is really, really high, way too much for any reasonable living environment. In a dark room, which is where we were last night, I like a peak white of about 30, or less than half of what we measured. Some other people like 30 to 40. So we ended up changing the cell light parameter, which is kind of like the backlight control on an LCD TV. We turned that down to the point where we got a peak white of about 34 foot Lamberts, which was beautiful. Didn't hurt the eyes. It was really, really good. The color space, when we set it to auto, the colors, red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow, all looked fabulous. They were right on the money, very low error rates. They were exactly as they were supposed to be. So we didn't really have to do very much to the colors at all. Red had the most errors, but even that wasn't bad. For fun, we measured the native color space. We changed the color space to native, which is what the OLED material can reproduce. And those colors were way whacked out. They were way too saturated, and the luminance was all over the place. A lot of the parameters, the hue and saturation, were also way, way out of where they should be for the current video system. Now, down the road, when we get UHD, Ultra HD, sometimes called 4K, those wild colors may very well be appropriate. And so OLED will lend itself well to that resolution. But for the moment, with 1080p, which is what this set is, we really need to conform to the system standards, what are technically called Rec 709, and the native mode does not do that. The auto mode does, and we didn't have to do anything to it in order for it to conform to that standard. So we were really happy about that. After we did a full calibration of the grayscale, the black to white gray area, all the errors at every brightness level were well under 1, which is completely indistinguishable to the human eye. So we really dialed that thing in really well. Now, we also looked at the gamma, which is a representation of how much light comes off the screen as you increase the brightness signal in the signal itself, the brightness number in the digital signal. The gamma we measured was about 2.1, and that is a little low. 2.2 is pretty much the standard. It's what I prefer. We clicked the gamma control one step, and it became 2.4, which was too high. So we clicked it back down. It was a little low for being perfect, but not bad. Not bad. So finally, we looked at some movie clips, which is really the whole point of this thing, isn't it? And we found that the shadow detail in Master and Commander, for example, that opening shot that I always look at for shadow detail, was not great. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. There were areas of blackness, of solid blackness that shouldn't have been. So we increased the brightness control by, I think, 3 clicks, and that helped a great deal. The shadow detail really started becoming visible at that point and in other clips that we saw as well. The colors were just so rich and vibrant without being garish, and that's really the trick. All the OLEDs I've seen in the past at trade shows, the colors are very garish, which they were probably set to their native color mode that I was talking about a minute ago. But in the auto mode, they looked just great. Skin tones on the movie Samsara, which was made by the same people that did Baraka, and Life of Pi also just looked natural, beautiful, as were the colors of water, sky, different animals, and foliage. All just looked fantastic. We also did a little bit of video processing testing from the Spears & Munsell HD benchmark disc. We set the PS3, the PlayStation, which is Leo's Blu-ray player, to output interlaced 1080i. And we played some interlaced clips and watched how well the set de-interlaced them. And it did a superb job. Really, really good. Nary a sign of any artifacts whatsoever. So signals coming from your cable box or your satellite box, which are interlaced typically in most stations, are going to be de-interlaced by this TV really, really well. My main complaint on this TV is the curved screen. Now, it isn't very curved. It's only, I don't know, 5 degrees or something, I think Leo said. But unfortunately, Leo has it set on a relatively high piece of furniture, and the stand that the TV is on, that is part of the TV itself, causes the TV to lean backwards slightly. And so with a combination of our eyes at seated height on the couch across from the TV being too low and the set being tilted upwards slightly, I could see that curvature, obviously. And it was kind of distracting. It made the top and bottom kind of bow in. It looked weird. I wish Samsung and others would end up making a flat OLED screen, and I think they probably will. At least I certainly hope so, because that would be then the ultimate TV. So that's it. Other than the curved screen, the Samsung KN55S9, as its official model designation is a spectacular TV. 55 inches is a bit small these days for what we look for today, and $9,000 is way more than most people can afford. But if you've got the dough and you can place the screen so that it's at the right height, so that your eyes are right centered on the screen, and you want the best picture quality you can get, you can't do better than this set. So, Leo, you did a great job. It's a fantastic TV. When you move, put it on a slightly lower stand than it is now, and put it even with your eyes, and you're going to enjoy just the most amazing picture I've ever seen in a relatively flat panel. It's a bit curved, but we'll call it a flat panel anyway. I want to thank Robert Heron for joining me on this calibration adventure. It was a lot of fun having him along. And you can find him online at heronfidelity.com. You can find me, of course, at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv. And you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott and also at avsforum. You can also find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here on twit.tv/htg. or its YouTube channel, youtube.com/twit Home Theater Geeks. Next week, I'll have a panel of journalists on the show to talk about what we see and hear at the CEDIA Expo, which is happening next week in Denver, Colorado. Plenty of news coming out of that show already in terms of press releases, and I can't wait to see what actually happens there at the show. And we'll bring it to you in the very next episode. So I hope you will join me for that. Until then, geek out.